The twin suns of Elion burned high over the marble courtyards of the Celestian Spire, casting light that shimmered like liquid gold across the domed towers. To Captain Ryan Hale, the human envoy assigned to the Empire of the Lasari, it was both beautiful and unbearable. The heat had a way of seeping through even the advanced cooling fibers of his uniform, turning every diplomatic outing into a quiet endurance test. But as he followed his escort through the echoing halls, he realized that the temperature wasn't what made his pulse race. It was her, the princess he had been sent to meet. He'd seen her briefly during the treaty assembly 3 days ago, radiant in gold and laughter, a living embodiment of the myths humans once wrote about angels. And now he would meet her alone. The Lasari were the most dazzling and dangerous civilization humanity had ever encountered. Ethereal beings whose skin reflected light like precious metal, whose eyes glowed faintly with bioluminescence, and whose technology blurred the line between science and sorcery. They had ruled this region of the galaxy for millennia, untouched and unchallenged, until the human expedition ships arrived. War had nearly followed, but diplomacy and luck had turned conflict into alliance. Ryan was one of the few chosen to help sustain that fragile peace. And the Princess Alarielle, daughter of the Celestian Queen, was to be the symbolic liaison between their two species. Her role was ceremonial, or so he'd been told. But when he first saw her on that golden balcony, sunlight tangled in her hair, her smile too vivid to be protocol, he realized that ceremonies could feel far too human. The throne hall of the Lasari opened before him like a dream carved from light. Massive columns of white stone spiraled toward the heavens, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed faintly like living veins. At its center stood Alarielle. She turned as he entered, her armor catching the sun, every curve and detail crafted with impossible precision. Elegant, ornate, and somehow alive. Her expression was soft, amused even, the faintest tilt of her lips revealing someone who had long grown bored of perfection. "You're punctual," she said, her voice a melody that resonated through the chamber. Ryan bowed slightly, fighting to remember his training. "Your Highness," he managed. "Thank you for granting me audience." "I was curious," she replied, stepping closer. "They say humans are fearless, yet you look as though standing here frightens you." He almost laughed. "I've been in firefights before, Princess. This doesn't compare." Her eyes, bright gold laced with emerald, studied him as though dissecting his honesty. "Firefights?" she repeated, tilting her head. "Ah yes, you creatures of war. You burn your own worlds for honor." He hesitated, not sure whether she mocked or marveled. "Sometimes we fight for survival," he said quietly. "Sometimes for something better." She smiled, faint but real. "And which are you fighting for now?" He didn't answer, but the truth was immediate. Her presence disarmed every practiced line he'd prepared. When she turned, her laughter echoed off the marble walls, bright and unguarded. "You humans," she said, glancing back over her shoulder. "You stare as though trying to memorize everything." Ryan's composure faltered. He hadn't realized how intently his eyes had followed her movement, the way the sunlight traced her armor, the strands of her hair catching the wind, the shimmer of gold across her skin. He blinked, caught between apology and confusion. "I didn't mean," but she turned fully, amusement flickering in her gaze. "Why were you staring at me, human?" she asked, her tone half teasing, half curious. "Do I offend your senses, or do I fascinate them?" His throat tightened. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "Most beings aren't," she replied, stepping closer. "But you looked at me as though I were unreal." "You're very real," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Her smile widened, soft, knowing. "Good," she whispered, "because sometimes even I forget." For a long moment, the air between them shimmered, not from heat but something unspoken. She studied him, as though weighing whether his honesty was courage or folly. Then, breaking the tension, she turned and motioned for him to follow. "Come," she said. "Let me show you what your Federation truly signed up for." They walked through archways of light into the inner gardens, a place that seemed untouched by time. Flowers glowed faintly with bioluminescent veins, and streams of liquid light wound between glass bridges. The scent of something sweet and alien lingered in the air. "Our people used to be like yours," Alarielle said quietly as they walked. "Restless, proud, hungry for more." She touched a tree whose bark shimmered like crystal. "Then we reached everything there was to reach, and we learned how empty eternity feels." Ryan studied her face, the quiet melancholy behind her smile. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, turning to him again. "We wait for something worth believing in." Her words hung between them like fragile glass. He wanted to ask if that was why she smiled the way she did, bright, defiant, hiding something deeper. But before he could, a distant chime echoed through the courtyard. A sound of ceremony, of duty. "My mother calls," she said, her tone shifting lighter again. "She enjoys her human guests, though she thinks you fragile." "We are," he admitted. "And yet you still wander the stars," she said, almost approvingly. She walked ahead, sunlight spilling across her like molten gold, and in that instant he realized how dangerously human it was to feel wonder. That evening, the diplomatic reception filled the great hall, a spectacle of song and color, of crystalline instruments and ethereal voices. Ryan stood among representatives, nodding through polite exchanges, but his thoughts remained elsewhere. Every time he glanced across the room, he found her watching him, not with formality, but curiosity. When the music shifted, she approached, her golden eyes gleaming beneath the lights. "Do humans dance?" she asked, offering her hand. "Badly," he said, but took it anyway. Her laughter, low and melodic, filled the air as they moved through the rhythm. A slow, ceremonial pattern that seemed to hum through the floor. "You move like someone trying to understand gravity," she teased. "We don't have much practice with royalty," he replied. "Then you're learning quickly." Their steps carried them toward the edge of the grand terrace, where the stars stretched like an ocean beyond the horizon. The music faded behind them, replaced by the whisper of wind through marble pillars. She leaned against the railing, her gaze distant. "You humans look at the stars and see mystery," she said. "We look and see memory. Every light up there is something we've already conquered." Ryan glanced at her, the wind stirring her hair into gold-lit strands. "Maybe mystery is better," he said softly. "It means there's still something left to reach for." Her expression softened, her voice barely a whisper. "And what is it you're reaching for, human?" He met her gaze, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he forgot why he'd come. "Something real," he said. "Something that feels alive." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she turned her hand and brushed his wrist, the faintest touch of her fingers sending a shock of warmth through him. "You shouldn't say things like that to a princess," she murmured. "It sounds almost dangerous." "Maybe I'm not very diplomatic," he said. She smiled. "No, you're something far worse, honest." She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the twin moons rising behind him. "And honesty, Captain Hale, is the one thing my people forgot how to bear." Her hand lingered on his for just a second longer before she turned away, her voice drifting like light through the darkness. "Be careful where you look, human. You might find more than you're ready for." When she left, the night felt colder. The stars above Ilion gleamed brighter than he had ever seen, each one like a promise waiting to be broken. Ryan stood alone on the terrace for a long time, the echo of her voice still in his chest. He didn't know what she meant, not fully, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever alliance his superiors had sent him to preserve, whatever mission he had come to fulfill, it had already changed. He had looked at her, truly looked, and in that single act, something ancient in him had awakened. Something dangerous, something human. Far above the palace, the golden spires gleamed against the darkness, their reflection caught in the rivers of light below. Somewhere deep within, Princess Alarielle stood before her mother's mirror, her laughter gone now, her eyes thoughtful. "He looked at me as though I were real," she whispered to her reflection, "as though I could still be something more." And for the first time in centuries, the princess of the Lasari, born to rule, born to shine, found herself wondering what it meant to be seen not as divine, but as alive. The days following the reception moved with the stillness of stars, quiet, poised, deceptively calm. Captain Ryan Hale tried to return to the rhythm of his diplomatic duties. Briefings, observation rounds, interspecies ethics reports, but his thoughts betrayed him. Every time he saw a shimmer of gold in the corridors, his mind conjured her. Princess Alarielle, with her sunlit hair and eyes that carried the gravity of entire constellations. He told himself it was fascination, not longing, curiosity, not attachment. But deep down, he knew the difference. Humans had always been creatures who mistook wonder for love. And here, among a race that had long forgotten either, he felt the edges of both bleeding together. His quarters overlooked the lower citadel, where Lasari citizens moved like flowing light beneath translucent bridges. Even at night, the city glowed soft, eternal, sterile. There was no darkness here, no shadow for thought to hide. He missed the imperfect skies of Earth, the uneven hum of cities, the gray dawn after rain. He missed reality or what passed for it. That morning, as he reviewed the latest intelligence packet, a soft tone echoed through his chamber. An invitation beacon, royal seal, the Lasari emblem unfolded in light, shimmering before him. Summons to the inner sanctuary. Audience requested by Her Highness, Princess Alarielle. His pulse stuttered once before logic caught up. Another diplomatic meeting, perhaps. Or maybe he dared think something else. The sanctuary was unlike any place he had seen. A vast hall bathed in filtered starlight, the ceiling open to reveal a swirling aurora that seemed alive. Columns of crystal rose like frozen lightning, humming softly, alive with power. And there, in the center of it all, she waited, without her ceremonial crown this time, dressed not for courtly formality but for freedom. Her armor was lighter, her shoulders bare, her golden hair unbound, flowing like sunlight through water. For a moment he forgot to breathe. "You came," she said simply, as though she had doubted he would. "You summoned me," he replied. "I thought refusing royalty was unwise." "Wise," she echoed with a faint smile. "That's not a word often associated with humans." He couldn't help it, he laughed. "Then perhaps we're overdue for a redefinition." Her eyes glinted in amusement. "Perhaps?" she said softly, and then, her tone shifting. "Do you know why I called you here, Captain?" He hesitated. "To discuss the treaty progress?" She shook her head, a motion as fluid as a wave. "No, to discuss you." He blinked, uncertain. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "Ever since that night, you've been occupying my thoughts. You look at things differently. You look at me differently. My advisors say it's human curiosity, but I think it's something else." She stepped closer, her voice a quiet melody. "Tell me, Ryan Hale, why do you stare the way you do? As if you're trying to find something no one else can see." He swallowed. The question struck too close to truth. "Because maybe I am," he said, meeting her gaze. "Maybe I'm trying to understand why someone so powerful, so perfect, looks like she's searching for something too." Her expression changed. Not anger, not surprise, but something more dangerous. Recognition. "You think I'm searching?" she asked softly. "You hide it well," he said. "But yes." She studied him for a long time, the silence between them charged with tension so delicate it could shatter under a whisper. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You're bolder than most who speak to me." "I'm human," he said. "We tend to talk our way into trouble." "And yet," she said, stepping close enough that the faint scent of her skin, a strange blend of ozone and starlight, filled the air. "You still haven't looked away." He didn't, couldn't. The glow of her eyes seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Maybe I'm still in trouble," he said quietly. She laughed, softly, genuinely, and it felt like a sunrise breaking inside him. "Maybe," she said, "but perhaps that's what I wanted." She turned then, motioning for him to follow, and led him deeper into the sanctuary. They walked along a suspended pathway of transparent light, beneath which rivers of luminescence flowed like liquid stars. "My people think emotion is weakness," she said after a moment. "We're taught to control it from birth, to suppress every surge of impulse, every flicker of feeling. They call it ascension. But sometimes I wonder if it's just another kind of death." Ryan listened quietly, her words echoing in the hollow chambers of his mind. "You don't sound convinced," he said. "I'm not," she admitted. "But they don't know that. Not even my mother. The Queen believes I've inherited her serenity, her control. But lately, she paused, glancing at him. "I find that serenity cracking." He slowed his steps. "Because of me?" Her gaze locked onto his, unflinching. "Because of the way you see me," she said. "You don't worship or fear or calculate. You simply look. No one has done that in centuries." "Maybe that's why we still dream," he said softly. "We haven't learned how to stop." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The air between them shimmered faintly, like heat rising from stone. Then, with a motion so gentle it seemed unintentional, she reached out and brushed her fingers along his arm. The contact was electric, alien and familiar all at once. "Your pulse is fast," she murmured. "Is that fear?" "No," he said, his voice lower than he intended. "It's something else." "Desire?" she asked, tilting her head. "Not just that," he said. "It's recognition." Her brows lifted slightly. "Of what?" "Of someone who feels alive," he said. Her lips parted slightly as though she might answer, but then she turned away, her armor catching the soft light. "You shouldn't say such things, human," she whispered. "You make me forget what I am." "Maybe that's the point," he said. She looked back at him, eyes bright with something halfway between challenge and longing. "Careful," she said. "You might make me human." The next moment shattered the stillness, an alarm tone pulsing through the sanctum, deep and resonant. The light along the pillars flickered. Alarielle's composure returned in an instant. She turned sharply toward the outer hall. "A breach," she said. "Stay here." "Like hell," Ryan said. "I'm coming with you." She gave him one look, half exasperation, half approval. "Humans," she muttered, "always disobeying." Together they moved down the corridor, toward the echo of distant chaos. Outside, the Lasari guards formed ranks along the palace gates, sleek figures in mirrored armor. Beyond them, the air shimmered with distortion, a rip in the atmosphere, faintly glowing. "Pirates," Alarielle said under her breath. "Scavengers from the outlands. They've breached orbit." Ryan's instincts kicked in. "Evac protocols?" "The city shield will hold," she said. "But they must have infiltrators inside. Someone wants a hostage." "You," he realized. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. "Then they'll have to get through me first," he said, drawing his pulse sidearm. Her gaze flicked toward him, unreadable. "You're either brave or foolish." "Usually both," he said. They reached the outer courtyard just as the first detonation echoed. The sky cracked with violet light, and armored figures emerged from the distortion. A dozen raiders, their weapons spitting arcs of plasma. Ryan dove for cover, returning fire, the air thick with heat and sound. The Lasari guards moved with inhuman grace, their energy lances cutting through the chaos, but the enemy was relentless. When one of them broke through the line, lunging toward Alarielle, Ryan didn't think, he moved. He intercepted the strike, his shoulder taking the blast meant for her. The pain was white-hot, but he stayed upright, grabbing the raider's weapon and slamming him to the ground. When the last intruder fell, silence reclaimed the courtyard. Smoke drifted through the air, glowing faintly in the light of the twin suns. Alarielle turned toward him, eyes wide. Not with fear, but something else. "You're injured," she said, her voice low. "It's nothing," he said, wincing as he pressed a hand to the burn. "Nothing?" she repeated. "You bled for me." "That's what humans do," he said. "We protect what matters." For the first time since he had met her, She looked unsure, vulnerable. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because you would have done the same," he said. She stared at him as though trying to deny it, but couldn't. Then, before he could say more, she stepped forward and pressed her palm against his wound. A golden light spread from her hand, searing through him, the pain dissolving into warmth. "Healing," she said quietly. "My people learned it eons ago, but I've never used it on anyone outside our kind." "Why now?" he asked. Her eyes met his. "Because you make me forget the lines that divide us." Her hand lingered on his chest, her breath trembling just slightly. Around them, the guards pretended not to see, turning away as protocol dictated. But in that moment, under the bright alien sun, something irrevocable had shifted. The air felt different. So did she. So did he. That night, when he returned to his quarters, the wound was gone. But the mark it left inside him was deeper. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, felt the warmth of her touch, heard her voice. He didn't know what this was, madness, obsession, connection, but he knew it was real. And somewhere, in her starlit chamber, Alarielle stood alone before her window, staring toward the human sector of the city. Her golden eyes reflected the night, her lips forming words she didn't dare say aloud. "Why do you keep looking at me that way, human?" she whispered to the darkness. "Because now, I can't stop looking back." The next sunrise over the Celestian spire came painted in gold and violet, spilling across the high towers and mirrored domes like the breath of creation itself. But for Ryan Hale, the light felt heavier than before, thicker somehow, charged with what had happened. He stood on the balcony of his quarters, watching the city stir awake. The Lissari moved below in perfect harmony, their world too flawless to be real. And yet, somewhere within that glittering order, something imperfect had happened, something that shouldn't have. He had bled for her. She had healed him. And now, whether he wanted to admit it or not, they were bound by something that neither diplomacy nor logic could explain. He spent the morning in silence, reviewing mission logs that blurred into meaningless lines of code. His superior officers would want details soon. A report, a justification, some careful phrasing to smooth over the chaos. But he couldn't write about her, not in a report, not in any language humans knew. She wasn't just another figure of politics or intrigue. Alarielle was something else entirely. A being who glowed even in darkness, whose laughter carried the weight of forgotten suns. She had said, "You make me forget what I am." He hadn't stopped thinking about that since. A soft chime broke the silence. Another message, this one without seal or signature. Just a pulse of golden light forming into words. "Meet me. Same place as before." He didn't have to guess who sent it. He didn't even hesitate. Minutes later, he was striding down the radiant halls toward the inner gardens. The guards barely looked at him now. He'd become a familiar anomaly, tolerated if not entirely understood. But as he entered the sanctuary, the air shifted, softer, alive. She was there, standing by the crystalline pool, the sunlight fracturing around her like liquid fire. Gone was the crown and formal regalia. She wore light ceremonial armor that clung to her frame, elegant and unguarded. When she turned, her smile hit him like gravity. "You came quickly," she said, her voice lilting. "I thought humans needed time to think before disobeying orders." "I'm learning," he said. "Maybe your world's starting to rub off on me." "If it has," she said, stepping closer, "then we're both in danger." He laughed softly, though his pulse didn't. "Dangerous how?" "The kind that makes empires tremble," she said. "And mothers furious." She said it lightly, but her eyes flickered. Something deeper there. "Your mother suspects," he guessed. "She suspects everything," Alarielle said with a sigh. "Queens must. But she doesn't see clearly anymore. She believes I'm still her flawless heir, her perfect reflection. She doesn't realize I've begun to see myself differently." Her words lingered like a secret between them. She gestured toward the water's edge, where tiny motes of light drifted like dust. "Do you know what this place was built for?" she asked. He shook his head. This was once our union pool, where Lasari bonded with their chosen mates. The light you see are memories of every union ever made, each one eternal. She looked down at the shimmering surface. We haven't used it in over 3,000 years. Love, for us, is considered obsolete. Ryan's voice softened. And yet you stand here. And yet, she said, looking up at him. I do. The sunlight caught her eyes. Amber turned molten gold. When you saved me yesterday, she continued quietly, something ancient in me woke up. Fear, gratitude, confusion. Things my people say are primitive. She stepped closer until he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. I don't think they are. I think they're the proof that we're still alive. He wanted to answer, to say something that made sense of it all, but nothing did. The air between them pulsed with something too human to name. Alarielle, he began, but she raised a hand. Don't, she whispered. Don't call me princess right now. Not here. Her tone was fragile, sincere. I don't want to be a symbol to you. I just want to know what I am to you. His heart stuttered. And then the truth came unbidden. You're the first person who's made this galaxy feel alive, he said. You make it more than duty, more than politics. You make it real. She closed her eyes briefly, as though steadying herself against the weight of his words. You shouldn't say that, she murmured. Because I'll believe you. Then believe me, he said. Her gaze met his again, uncertain, luminous, and breaking. She took another step, so close now that the golden patterns on her armor brushed the fabric of his uniform. Humans are reckless, she said softly. You touch things even when you know they'll burn you. Maybe that's why we feel alive, he said. Because we're willing to get burned. For a moment, everything else fell away. The light, the silence, the vastness of her world. There was only the pulse of her breath, the tremor of her voice, the way she looked at him like something forbidden but inevitable. If anyone saw us, she whispered, they would call it heresy. Then let them, he said. Let them see what they've forgotten. Her lips parted, her breath catching, and then she turned abruptly away. No, she said, her tone wavering. You don't understand. If my mother learns of this, if she senses anything, you'll be exiled or worse. And what about you? He asked. She'll strip me of my title, she said. Erase me from the records. The Lasari will pretend I never existed. She turned back to him, her eyes burning like twin stars. Would you still say it's worth it? He didn't hesitate. Yes. For a heartbeat, the universe seemed to still. Then she exhaled, a trembling sound halfway between disbelief and surrender. You're a fool, she whispered. But maybe, I envy that. And then, like the slow unfurling of dawn, her hand lifted hesitant, shaking, and touched his cheek. No one's ever looked at me like this, she said. No one's ever dared. Maybe they should have, he said. Maybe you deserve to be seen. The contact lingered, soft and electric, until the sound of approaching footsteps shattered it. She pulled back instantly, eyes wide. Guards, she whispered. They can't find you here. He moved to protest, but she shook her head sharply. Go. Through the east archway. Now. What will you tell them? He asked. Whatever I must, she said. Please, Ryan. He hesitated for only a moment longer before slipping away, the echo of her touch still burning on his skin. The next day, the palace felt colder. Word spread through the corridors that the queen had doubled the royal guard. Alarielle was nowhere to be seen. Ryan spent hours pacing his quarters, mind racing. Had someone seen them? Had she been questioned? The uncertainty gnawed at him until nightfall, when the sound of footsteps stopped outside his door. A guard stood there, silver armor gleaming, expression unreadable. The queen requests your presence, he said. Ryan's stomach turned cold. He followed in silence through corridors lined with golden statues. The throne chamber loomed ahead, vast and dim, the air heavy with judgment. The queen sat upon her throne, a vision of impossible beauty and power, her crown glowing like a star. Her eyes were colder than space. Human, she said, her voice a soft thunder. You've served well, but your time here is ending. He stiffened. Your Majesty. You've crossed lines, she interrupted. Lines that do not exist for your kind to touch. Do not pretend ignorance. My daughter speaks too freely of you. The hall seemed to tighten around him. If I've offended the court, you've offended me, she said sharply. But you are fortunate. Humans are valuable allies, and I am merciful. You will leave tomorrow at dawn. You will tell your superiors that the Lasari remain loyal to peace. And you will never speak to my daughter again. The words hit harder than any wound. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Does she know? He asked quietly. The Queen's expression didn't flicker. She will, she said. He bowed, fists clenched, and turned to leave. That night, as he packed his things in silence, the door to his quarters slid open, and there she was. Her armor gleamed in the dim light, her hair unbound, her eyes wild with something between fury and sorrow. She told you, she said. He nodded once. She's sending me away. Then I'll go with you. You can't, he said. Your people aren't mine anymore, she said. Not if they mean losing this. He took a step toward her, disbelief and hope warring in his chest. You'd give up everything? I already have, she said softly. The moment you looked at me like I was more than a crown. Before he could answer, the alarm bells began to toll again. The same deep resonance as before, but louder, closer. Her head turned sharply. She knows, Alarielle whispered. We don't have much time. Ryan's pulse raced. Then what do we do? She looked back at him, her eyes blazing gold and defiance. We run. And for the first time in her immortal life, the princess of the Lasari chose something forbidden. Not for empire, not for duty, but for a single human heartbeat. The sirens of the Celestian Spire blared through the night, a haunting chime that echoed across the golden towers of Ilion. It was the sound of betrayal, of broken order, of one who had dared to defy the most powerful being in the galaxy. The corridors pulsed with light as the palace guards mobilized, their mirrored armor gleaming under the radiance of alarm beacons. But within that chaos, two figures ran against the current, one in regal gold, the other in dull human gray. Princess Alarielle and Captain Ryan Hale, fugitives within the very heart of her empire. The air shimmered with energy fields and containment barriers, each one flickering into place behind them as they sprinted through the curved hallways. Where are we going? Ryan called, his voice ragged from the sprint. Out, she said, her tone sharp, urgent. There's a transport bay beneath the lower citadel, used for diplomatic exchanges. If we can reach it before the palace locks down. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. He already knew what failure meant. They reached a narrow corridor lit only by the glow of security runes. Alarielle placed her hand against a panel, her eyes flashing briefly as her biometrics engaged. The door hissed open. You're overriding royal protocols? He said between breaths. I thought you said you couldn't. I said I shouldn't, she corrected, a flicker of defiance in her tone. There's a difference. They slipped inside, the door sealing behind them. The tunnel beyond was dark, lined with crystalline conduits that pulsed faintly with light. This leads beneath the spire, she said. It connects to the outer transport bay. My people used it during the Purity Wars. Ryan slowed his pace, glancing at her as they moved through the glowing corridor. You're risking everything for me, he said. Why? Her steps faltered slightly. Because I've spent centuries living for everyone else, she said softly. For the expectations of my mother. For the perfection my people demand. For the crown. And then you came, and for the first time, I wanted to live for myself. She looked at him, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. You looked at me like I was real, Ryan. No one's ever done that. The air between them thickened, charged with something raw and fragile. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that she was real, painfully, beautifully so, but the faint hum of approaching energy signatures shattered the moment. They're tracking us, he said, checking his scanner. Multiple heat signatures closing in. She exhaled sharply. Then we move faster. They broke into a run again, the corridor curving downward into a vast chamber lit by blue energy lines. The transport bay stretched before them, massive, echoing, with several small vessels docked in silent rows. The shimmering fields of containment still held steady, but they wouldn't for long. Alarielle led him toward a sleek silver craft marked with the crest of the royal fleet. "Will it fly?" Ryan asked. "It's old," she said. "But yes." She pressed her palm to the access panel, and the craft hummed to life, golden light rippling along its hull. But before they could board, a cold, commanding voice filled the chamber. "Alarielle." The word struck like thunder. Ryan turned, and his blood froze. The queen stood at the far end of the bay, flanked by a dozen Lasari guards. She was radiant and terrible, her armor brighter than the suns outside, her expression carved from centuries of power. "Step away from him," the queen said, her voice calm, echoing through the vast space. "You know what you're doing violates every law of our kind." Alarielle didn't move. "Then perhaps the laws need to change." "You shame yourself," the queen said. "You shame me." "No," Alarielle said quietly. "I'm saving myself." The queen's eyes flicked toward Ryan, filled with disdain. "And this human? What is he to you? A pet? A novelty? They are fragile creatures, Alarielle. They age. They break." "And yet," Alarielle said, her voice trembling but steady, "they feel. They live every moment as if it's their last. Tell me, mother, when was the last time you felt anything at all?" A deadly silence followed. Then, with a slow motion, the queen raised her hand. "Take him." The guards advanced instantly. Ryan drew his weapon, but Alarielle stepped forward, her own armor igniting with radiant energy. A burst of light flared from her palms, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The guards staggered back, shields flaring. "Go!" she shouted to Ryan. "Get to the ship." "I'm not leaving you," he shouted back. "You have to," she said. "They won't stop until I'm gone. You can't fight them. Neither can you." "I don't have to win," she said, her eyes fierce. "I just have to choose." Before he could respond, she turned toward her mother, energy crackling around her like a living storm. "You once told me love was weakness," she said, her voice rising. "You were wrong. It's strength. It's the only thing that makes any of this matter." The queen's gaze hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." She extended her arm, and a spear of light formed in her hand, humming with power. Alarielle mirrored her, the air vibrating between them as the energy grew. Ryan stood frozen for an instant, watching two gods prepare to destroy each other, and then instinct took over. He sprinted forward, grabbing Alarielle's wrist just as the two blasts collided. The explosion tore through the chamber, a wave of blinding gold and white that shattered glass and metal alike. When the light faded, the queen was on one knee, her weapon dimmed. Alarielle stood trembling, her armor scorched, her breathing ragged. Ryan pulled her toward the ship, shouting over the alarms. "Now! We have to go!" She hesitated, looking back at her mother. Still kneeling, eyes full of something Ryan couldn't name. "Go," the queen said quietly, her voice shaking. "If you must live like them, then go. But know this, you can never return." Alarielle's eyes filled with tears that shimmered like liquid light. "Goodbye, mother." And then she turned, following Ryan into the ship. The engines roared to life, a cascade of brilliance erupting beneath the vessel as it lifted from the bay. Guards fired energy bolts, but the shields held. The ship blasted through the containment field, streaking into the open skies of Ilion. Below, the city glowed like a jewel, perfect, eternal, untouchable. And above it, the stars awaited. Inside the cockpit, Ryan guided the ship through the atmosphere, the controls shaking violently. "We're breaking through," he said through gritted teeth. "Hold on." The vessel shuddered as it pierced the upper layer of the planet's sky, the silence of space enveloping them in an instant. For a long while, neither spoke. The stars stretched endlessly before them, distant and alive. Finally, Alarielle exhaled, a sound that was half a sob, half a laugh. I can't believe we did it, she whispered. Neither can I, he said, his voice soft. You just defied the most powerful empire in the galaxy. She looked at him then, her golden eyes glimmering with something far beyond fear. No, she said. We did. She leaned back, her body trembling from exhaustion, and looked out the viewport at the scattering constellations ahead. Where do humans go when they run? She asked quietly. Anywhere they can still see the stars, he said. Then that's where I want to go. Ryan looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a princess, not a symbol, but a woman who had traded eternity for a heartbeat. You'll hate it sometimes, he said. It's loud, chaotic, imperfect. Good, she said. I'm tired of perfection. The ship drifted onward into the unknown. Two fugitives from opposite worlds chasing something neither could name, but both understood. And as the light of Elian faded behind them, Alarielle turned to him, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Tell me, human, she said softly, when you first stared at me, was this what you saw coming? He smiled faintly. Not even close. The first night in open space was a silence deeper than any Ryan Hale had known. The stars hung like frozen embers across the void, bright but unreachable. The hum of the small ship filled the stillness, steady and soft, the only heartbeat between two fugitives who had left an empire behind. Ryan stood by the forward viewport, watching the distant glow of Elian shrink until it was just another point of light among thousands. Behind him, Alarielle slept, or rather pretended to. Her breathing was slow, controlled, her armor discarded for the first time since he'd met her. Without the radiant metal and ceremony, she looked almost human. He turned slightly, studying her as she lay curled on the bench, her golden hair spilling over the fabric like molten light. He thought of the first moment he saw her, aloof, untouchable, divine, and felt the strangest ache. He'd thought her world too perfect for anyone real to survive in. And now here she was, exiled, exhausted, free. He should have felt guilt for being the cause of it, but instead, all he felt was awe. For the first time since leaving Earth, the stars didn't seem distant. They seemed like witnesses. When she stirred, her eyes opened, gold catching the dim light of the ship. You're still awake, she murmured, her voice raw from fatigue. Couldn't sleep, he said. The engines hum too quietly. It feels unnatural. She smiled faintly. You humans need noise to feel alive. Maybe, he said, or maybe we just can't believe in peace without sound. She sat up slowly, her movements deliberate, graceful even in exhaustion. You're bleeding again, she said, nodding to the scorch on his shoulder. It's nothing, he said. It's healing fine. You really should stop saying that, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Your body speaks louder than your words. He watched as she moved toward him, bare feet silent on the deck. When she touched his arm, her fingers glowed faintly, the soft pulse of Lasari energy seeping through his skin. The warmth spread slowly, dissolving the ache beneath. You shouldn't have to keep fixing me, he said quietly. It's not fixing, she said. It's remembering. Remembering what? That I can still help. That I can still be something other than perfect. They stood close now, the distance between them reduced to the fragile space of shared breath. You gave up everything, he said. Your crown, your home, your mother. I didn't give them up, she said softly. I traded them for something I thought I'd never have. And what's that? He asked. Her eyes met his, bright, steady, alive. Choice. The silence that followed was heavier than words. She reached out, brushing her hand along his jawline, her touch feather-light. When you first looked at me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I thought you were arrogant, foolish, a child staring at a flame. And now? He asked, his voice low. Now, she said, her lips curving faintly. I think you were the only one brave enough to see me burn. Her confession hung in the air like the slow unfurling of dawn. Ryan felt the air leave his lungs, replaced by something that burned warmer, deeper. He leaned forward slightly, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin, close enough to see the faint shimmer of energy that rippled across her eyes. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered, "You still stare, human." "I can't help it," he said. "You're impossible not to look at. And you," she murmured, "are impossible to forget." The stars moved slowly beyond them, streaks of silver threading through the void as the ship drifted toward the unknown. Somewhere, in the distant corridors of her mother's palace, history was already rewriting itself. The queen who had ruled for 1,000 years would be forced to explain the unthinkable, that her heir had chosen mortality, that the divine had chosen a human. But out here, among the stars, there were no witnesses, only truth. Days blurred into one another. They mapped their course toward neutral space, following the faint signatures of human colonies along the outer rim. Alarielle adjusted to the rhythm of the ship with uncanny ease, though every mechanical vibration seemed strange to her. "Your ships are alive in their own way," she said one morning, tracing her fingers across a panel. "They hum like nervous hearts." "That's because they break often," Ryan said dryly. She smiled. "Then they're more human than I thought." As time passed, her formal tone softened, her speech less lyrical, more human. She laughed more often, freely, unexpectedly. Ryan found himself memorizing the sound, the way it filled the narrow ship with warmth. They argued about trivial things, navigation choices, food packs, the definition of beauty, and somewhere between those moments, the gulf between species dissolved. They became less human and Lasari, and more simply two people trying to survive the same silence. But peace never lasts forever. The ship's alarm flared one afternoon, a sharp tone slicing through the quiet. "Contact," Ryan said, scanning the display. "Unidentified signature. Closing fast." "Pirates?" Alarielle asked, moving beside him. "No government vessel. Lasari ID codes." Her face hardened instantly. "They found us." The ship shuddered as energy blasts grazed the hull. "We can't outrun them," Ryan said. "Their drives are stronger." She glanced at him, her jaw set. "Then we don't run." She activated the auxiliary console, her hands flying over alien glyphs. The Lasari craft responded almost instantly, its weapons folding inward, energy scattering in dazzling arcs. "What are you doing?" Ryan shouted. "Something my mother taught me," she said. "Endings." A brilliant surge of golden light erupted from their ship, forming a radiance so blinding it lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. For a moment, the pursuing vessel faltered, its sensors overwhelmed. But the light came with a cost. The ship's systems dimmed, power draining fast. "We're burning too hot," Ryan said. "We'll lose containment." "Then take us somewhere they can't follow," she said, gripping the console. "Anywhere." He slammed the navigation override, and the ship veered sharply toward an uncharted nebula ahead, a swirling mass of violet clouds and electromagnetic storms. The Lasari vessel hesitated at its edge but did not pursue. Within moments, they vanished inside the storm, their sensors useless. The turbulence was violent. The ship shook as lightning arcs illuminated the cabin in bursts of purple light. Alarielle fell against him, her hand gripping his shoulder for balance. "This was your plan?" she shouted over the noise. "Improvisation," he said. "We humans excel at it. And dying from it, I imagine," she yelled back, though a laugh broke through the chaos. When the storm finally subsided, the ship emerged into a pocket of calm. Beyond the viewport, the nebula's heart stretched endlessly, glowing, alive, beautiful. They were adrift, but safe. Alarielle slumped against the wall, exhausted, laughing softly. "You're insane," she said. "And you're still here," he said. "So are you." The ship floated silently, its hull reflecting the violet light like glass. Alarielle stood beside him at the viewport, her reflection shimmering against the stars. "If we die here," she said, her tone almost wistful, "at least it will be far from perfection." "We won't die," he said. Not after everything we've survived. She smiled faintly. You always believe you can win. No, he said quietly. I just believe we can. She looked at him for a long time, something unreadable passing through her eyes. Then she reached for his hand and held it. Not as a queen, not as an exile, but as a woman choosing something fragile and infinite at once. When I was a child, she said softly, I used to look at the stars and wonder what it felt like to touch one. I thought they would burn. Now I know they do, but I think the burn was worth it. Ryan turned to her, his voice barely a whisper. It always is. Outside, the nebula pulsed with quiet life, a sanctuary carved in light. The Lasari Empire would speak of their princess for generations, some calling her traitor, others legend. Humanity would tell stories of the woman who gave up eternity for love. But neither empire would know the truth, that they were still out there somewhere, drifting among the stars, carving a new world from the fragments of two. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her golden hair glowing faintly in the violet light. You still stare, she murmured. Old habits, he said, smiling. And? She whispered. And I'll never stop. The stars burned brighter around them, reflecting in her eyes like tiny, endless suns. And for the first time in the long history of both their worlds, eternity finally felt human.